Thank y'all for coming again. We're going to talk about yogurt today. This is one of my favorite things. It's just very versatile. You can do about anything with it. And being able to make it at home allows you to be able to really change some of the effects. Now, we did go ahead and change this into kind of what all you can do with milk and the fermentation, because I actually made some cheese, because I had some rennet for one of them. And y'all can look up above if y'all can see it. It's just plain rennet. I picked it up online. It's actually supposed to be refrigerated. There you go. Rennet. Here. Actually,
Is that on the sheet?
No. It was supposed to go with the Skyr, because basically when you get the Skyr done, it makes a really thin yogurt. Then you add rennet to it, and then you process it like a cheese. That's what this is. This is a strainer that's specifically designed for yogurt and cheese.
How do you spell that?
Rennet, R-E-N-N-E-T. And they have vegetarian rennet, and I just like using the plain animal rennet.
So
Which,
you say we get that
I do.
online?
Yep. Want to pass that around?
Online.
I do get it online. You can buy it. I don't know any place locally you can buy it, but I know Greensboro and Roanoke has places that it comes from. That actually came from a cheese making company up north that makes really good products. That's actually where I got the starters as well. So, almond yogurt. Yogurt's been around for many years. I tried to actually do some research and write down the history of it until I realized that it would be way more than I could put in any handout without getting a book. People in other countries have been working with this since the dawn of time in any different format. I know the main origin story for both yogurt and cheese comes from the Bedouins storing milk in a bag that they made out of the stomach of a calf. And when they finally got to where they were going after all the jostling, it was hard and tasted a lot better than what they thought it would. So they kept making it. And that leads to my favorite thing about yogurt anyway, when you're using live active cultures. A lot of the probiotic yogurts you buy in the store will also have the live active cultures. And if you're ever worried about that, you can actually look on the label and it should say live active cultures in exactly those words. And then you can do this at home, just off of store-bought yogurt. So there are two different types of the cultures that make yogurt. You have a thermophilic and a mesophilic. The thermophilic actually needs to be heated to be processed. And when people think of yogurt, you think of putting it in the oven, letting it sit with just the light on, wrapped in a towel, so that it can maintain the temperature, so it will actually create yogurt and not something far worse. So I did one thermophilic and I did two mesophilics. The mesophilics are more room temperature, like 70 to 78 degrees is their ideal temperature for growth. I actually turned the temperature up in here over the weekend so that I could leave it out on the counter and then come back and get a full quart at the end of the day. So to start off, starting with the thermophilic, and that's actually what this was supposed to be. I am not going to do much with that because you can see it looks like it turned into cheese. This was Belgian thermophilic culture. The starter for this that I had yesterday was really beautiful, and that's what are in these cups. When you come up to taste, you can actually taste all of this. There's nothing up here that is bad. This one, the texture is going to be really off, but still the flavor will be there. Technically, I could take this, reheat for a tablespoon of the starter, so the live active yogurt. This could also be store-bought yogurt, any yogurt that you want to use. I'll stay away from anything with a flavor, purely because that's going to transmit into the next batch and then into the next batch and so on. So if you ever decide to do like a savory type, tzatziki or any sauce like that, if you started with strawberry yogurt, it's going to taste like strawberries at the end. It's just going to be a little bit more diluted each time you do it. Start with plain yogurt, it's going to go through. Now, just holding that up, and I'll actually pass these around as well. Well, this one, because the other two I taped to the jar so that I can remember what's in them. That way, y'all actually know what we're what we're looking at. So it's a thermophilic Belgian style starter. I did also pick these up online. You can use, technically now that I've made them, you can come down here and get a tablespoon of that, put it in milk, and sit it. For this one, you have to heat the milk to 180 degrees and then slowly cool it down to anywhere between 105 to 90. And that's when you can add in the culture and slowly stir it in. That's the entire reason why I'm not stirring that and calling it a day, because if I do, it will break up the chains in it. So when I make the next batch, it may not turn out. But as with anything fermented, you're relying on the bacteria. They're a living thing. They may do it in the time frame that you've been told they're going to. They may not. It may take a day. It may take two. And it's a lot of experimentation with it, but it does make a really good product. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of hedged my bets today, and I had some store-bought yogurt in case nothing turned out. When I pulled the Skyr starter, it was a liquid. Like, it is literally a little bit sour. It tastes like Skyr, but it's milk. So I was really worried that it wasn't gonna turn out at the end of the day. So, wanted to make sure y'all had enough to taste and be figuring out what everything's going. All this is made with 2% or whole milk. You can actually use any type of milk, and that includes like almond milk, soy milk. I've actually heard that you can use oat milk, but I'm kind of worried about that because the proteins in it should be a little bit different, but our research said that you could use it. So anything that says milk in the label, you can use to create yogurt. Yet again, make sure you follow the directions if you use a packet, if you're trying to do it with a like starter yogurt. For example, like one of the store-boughts that I have behind me, it may take a little bit of playing with to get the texture where you want because of how long the fermentation takes. I know soy milk, the fermentation was a lot longer than it was with normal milk. But typically you should have a full batch within 48 hours, and that's leaving it at room temperature with the mesophilic. The thermophilic is anywhere between 8 to 12. And with the thermophilic, just showing through what we have.
You mean 8 to 12 days?
Hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything's gonna be in hours. This is not, you shouldn't have it fermenting for days unless you're looking for a really sour yogurt. Typically, the longer you ferment it, the more sour it's gonna get. That's the reason why Greek yogurt is typically a little bit more sour than just, plain yogurt that you pick up in the store. That's because you have to strain Greek yogurt in one of these, or in a strainer, cheesecloth, whatever option you have that you would like to work with. I really like this because it's easy to clean, and where I rotate batches of this at the house, it makes it really, really easy. Now, I didn't bring any of the yogurt I have at the house because at this point it's kind of a conglomeration. I can't say it's, Villi, I can't say it's Belgian, I can't say it's Skyr. It's more of a house yogurt is the best way I can put it, because as each culture goes through, it dies off. Typically 7 days, if you make it, is where the line is for making another batch off a homemade. For store-bought, it's quite a bit longer. Basically, as long as it's in date, it should be able to work. And just showing the different ones, and you can see at the top of this how it's very thin, but Skyr is supposed to be strained, but I had the cheese going, so I wanted to make sure that everything went through. Yet again, flavors are going to be exactly what they need to be. The actual texture of those are going to be a little bit different just because they needed a little bit more processing. With the thermophilics, you have to keep them at between that 100 or 90 degrees and 105 degrees for that entire 12 hours. This is just a really big thermos. I absolutely adore it. It's big enough to fit a quart jar, which means you can take the yogurt, put it in the quart jar, fill this with hot water. Like the entire time you're working on the yogurt, have hot water running into this and around this. Take it out, pour it out, drop the quart jar down into it, close it up, set it aside until time's up. Then you open it up and you should have good yogurt.
Did you order that online also?
Yeah, I actually got this a while ago. It's from Culture Cupboard is the actual brand name of this. But if you can find an option that works, it works. The yogurt makers work wonderful too. Instapots work wonderful as long as it can be set at that temperature and go. I know the older way of doing it was putting it in your oven, turning the light on in the oven and wrapping it with a towel. And that should keep it at temperature, because you can't really turn your oven on and expect it to stay around 100 degrees because it's immediately going to jump up to like 200, which is going to kill your bacteria. The bacteria itself for this just breaks down the protein and reorganizes it, and that's what makes it thick. It's the same process with the cheese. It's the same process with like sour cream, ricotta, you know, about anything you can think of that is milk-based. That's all it's doing, rearranging the proteins. Each,
Buttermilk.
same process.
We used to have
Yep, it's the exact same process. We actually do a variation of that every time we make ranch here because we use heavy cream. So we use heavy cream with like a dash of vinegar and let it sit for a second.
that. Yeah.
And that separates it out a little bit and makes it like a really high-fat buttermilk, which makes a really good ranch at the end of it. I'm actually really excited about trying it. I'm trying to keep from getting to that point before we get done. So I have each individual starter here. Basically, these took the exact same time. When you buy the packets, if you're using the packets, follow the directions on the packets. Typically, they're going to make a cup of starter. Each time you make another batch, you need 1 tablespoon per quart. If you're making a half gallon, it's 2. That's the whole thing. If you're going a whole gallon, use 4. Just dump it in there, kind of stir it up slowly, making sure everything's there. Especially with Mesophilic, you can just set it aside, corner of the kitchen, wherever you see that it would work. 1,001 ways to do things. I'm just going to show you, yet again, this is the Villi. See how it's very milk-like, just through. This did not have any hardening, any curd in it at all when it got done, but it did taste like a wonderful yogurt. It's just not hardened. Whenever you're using the freeze-dried packets, sometimes it takes like 2 or 3 run-throughs before you actually get a good solid yogurt, whereas if you're using store-bought yogurt, the next batch you do is going to be perfect. It's just always where that one's already had its kinks worked out and the culture's growing and getting everything going. When you dump it into the new batch, it's going to immediately push through and make a lot better product. Any questions?
Do you have a brand name for the live yogurts?
I like using cultures for health. They're,
I mean, you said the yogurts that you get from the store.
I don't know.
Just look at
Yeah.
it.
I actually didn't need to check these. I was trying to make sure that we had everything through. Yep. Contains 5 live and active cultures, including, and then it goes through. This actually has the Bulgarian in it, which is the Belgian. And I'm going to have to step around and make sure I can show that. And right there where it says below, or keep refrigerated, when y'all come off, it actually breaks all that down. And any yogurt that you pick up in a store that does have live culture will show that. And that's part of the reason why I did want to go with store brand, just to show you that any of them would work. Now there are some, I know like, what is it, the Danon or the 000 stuff, any of the stuff that you have that has some artificial sweeteners, it may or may not be live active. Just because the bacteria in the yogurt can't really handle the artificial sweeteners. They kind of just die off. Any other questions?
Yes, how do you know when the fermentation is at the right stage? I know you said if it looks right, stop, but I don't know what looks right.
I'm trying to pick one up that's going to, here we go. So, it's always going to look like milk in the jar. It's not really going to turn colors. If it does, we're in trouble. Don't eat it if it's turning off color, because that means that you had other bacteria in there that you really don't need. But if you look toward the top of this, you see how it's very chunky and going through. That's how you can tell.
So when it gets to that stage, it's good.
Yes. Tasting it throughout is also a possibility. Just make sure you use a clean spoon every time. With this, it's really, really important, because if you put a dirty spoon in it, you're introducing other bacteria, and you can cause an infection in it, which is going to take the taste completely somewhere else. Could be really good, could be really bad. Nobody knows until you do it. Yet again, it's like any live active anything, though. It is all based on the actual bacteria. Is that right? Yes.
Yes, that is right.
Okay. But we have plenty of different types up here to try. I did do a couple different batches, and it looks like some are holding up, some are not, some have curds in it, some don't. But yet again, when you're making anything like this, it is all trial and error, especially when you're doing it at home. You're going to have some that are really, really good, and you're going to have some that turn out with good. And the only thing that I can say about that is when you do have one, you can just continue to keep using it. If you come up with one that has a weird taste, or if it does this where it curdles, I wouldn't use that bacteria again, because if you keep repeating it, it's just going to keep making the exact same product. And as I said, these all are good to taste. We have opened all of them and actually tried them ourselves to make sure. But basically what it comes down to is you just have to watch it and figure out which way you want it to go. If you want a more sour yogurt, you leave it out longer. If you want a lighter yogurt that doesn't really have a whole lot of sourness to it, you can pull it rather quickly after time. 48 hours is the max. I would suggest leaving it at room temperature. After that point, you start getting really sour. And that is, well, if you're looking for that, it can be really good. I know for some of the like Mediterranean dishes, it calls for really sour, thick yogurt. Typically like northern Morocco type things. But unless you're going with that style of food, I honestly would say 48 hours is the most I'll leave it out. Any other questions? I'm running through all my material really quick.
So when you got it where you want to put it in the fridge?
Yes. That does not kill the bacteria, it just slows down their processes. So technically, if it's still milk-like before you put it in the refrigerator, there's a likelihood it's going to thicken up by the time you come back. Normally I leave mine in there overnight, they suggest 6 hours, but yet again, it does depend on what culture you use, unless you're using store-bought, in which case it's truly up to you to play around with. Of course, you know, all the bad things to look for, milk, mold, you know, see any of that, toss it out. Make sure you sanitize the jars really, really heavily. We have a wonderful dishwasher back there that hits 181 degrees to make sure everything's sanitary. So before I started, I ran everything through but this. Of course, you don't run furnaces through a dishwasher because they just fill up with water. But yeah, typically when I make it at home, I have a hodgepodge one that I run, and every Saturday I'll drop a new batch and let it sit out in my kitchen. Saturday night I'll just put it in the cooler. I honestly got to the point now and I'll check it, but I normally mix mine with honey and I'll put it in a cup with a little bit of milk. So I drink it more as a shake. But any other questions?
What are the advantages of homemade yogurt?
You can make it anything you want to make it. I know Skyr is rather hard to find in the area that's good. You have Siggy's, which is a brand name of it, and Aldi's sometimes carry it, but their flavors taste very artificial. Whereas if you make it from scratch, you can actually put real fruit in it, which we have up here for y'all to have as part of the taste test. So you can get more powerful flavors out of it. If you like more sour yogurt, or if you like more like thick yogurt, you can go through the entire process and make it what you want. And especially for me, where it may change per dish I'm making, what type of yogurt I need, it makes it very useful that I can take like Belgian yogurt, if it turns out right, throw it in the strainer overnight, and then have Greek yogurt the next morning. Because technically the Greek yogurt, the only difference is it's thickened. So you just strain it. Overnight works. And if you look on the bottom, it has this, that's whey. I know in your packet, it has a couple uses for it. Basically, as a gardener, this is like the best fertilizer you can ever have. Throw it in a little bit of water, your plants burn up instantly. That and coffee grounds, believe it or not. Coffee grounds, eggshells, and whey, and plants love it. But when you strain it, the whey comes down. Yogurt is technically a cheese, just the fermentation on it. Rennet just speeds up the process and makes it thicker. Skyr itself, when you make it, you have to, a couple different ways. You can just eat it like this because the bacteria gives it a certain flavor. It actually gives it the flavor it's supposed to have. Whereas if you're wanting it to be thicker, you strain it. If you're wanting it to be like the stuff you buy in the store, you have to add a drop of rennet. Now the rennet is very, very, very powerful. Like 1 teaspoon will do a gallon of milk in 45 minutes. If it is as strong as, if it's as strong as it is when it comes from where it comes from, the more you leave it out in the open, the less strong that gets. So the more rennet you actually have to use. But yet again, that's something that it takes experimentation to find out. That actually took me 45 minutes to make. Put 2 drops of rennet in a bottle of water and shook it up and then poured it in whole milk and let it sit in the corner of the kitchen while I worked all day Saturday. And when I went to it, it was solid on top. So I took a knife and cut it up so you break the curds up. And then just let it sit for like an hour longer so the whey kind of comes up above the curds. And at that point, it kind of tastes mozzarella-y. Not stringy, but the actual flavor. And then you let it sit in the strainer. If you're actually making like a hard cheese or like a cottage cheese, you would take this, put it in cheesecloth and hang it, and the gravity itself would cause it to go down. Where this has more surface area, it's not thickening as much, but I wanted y'all to see like the different processes in it, if that makes any sense. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, anything?
So after you make it, then you can use, take the spoon to that to make another batch.
Yep. Always within 7 days of making it. After 7 days, you get into a little funky period of you may not get the bacteria you want. Just because where if you keep one container open for 7 days and keep eating out of it, you're always introducing stuff to the top. And of course, that may cause it to change in different ways. Some may be good, some may be bad. It's just all about smell and taste. If you look at it and it doesn't look right, please don't eat it.
Okay, I do have a question. You say when the starter is done, it will last up to 2 weeks. You mean that bottle starter right there, the jar starter?
The first cup that I started. So
Okay.
this is a cup. I took a
Okay,
cup of
and
milk.
that's the starter.
Yep.
And you made it with the cultures and,
Milk.
no, just milk.
Yep, just milk. The mesophilic ones, if you're using ultra pasteurized milk, you don't need to heat it up. If you're using just pasteurized milk, you need to heat it up. You heat it up to 100 and, well, for that you heat it up to 120, and that kind of makes sure any bugs that may be in your milk is out, especially if you're using farm fresh milk. They always pasteurize them, but you just want to make 100% sure, especially when you're continuing the fermentation process. But any milk will do, and I know from personal experience, the better quality milk you use, if you use the milk you like to drink, a lot better quality in the long run. Because I know each one has a different flavor. If you get the really cheap milk, whatever the cheapest one they got, it does taste a little bit different than if you get something like Homestead. But yet again, different fat contents, 2%, 1% skim, all pays out on the end, but it's all the protein in it. It's not even the fat. That's how you can have that zero fat yogurt, just use skim milk. It may take a little bit longer on the fermentation, but normally it should be done about the same time. Any other questions?
We're having a lot of messy kitchens.
If the kitchen isn't messy, you're not using it. It's just all about cleaning it after you get done. I tell people that I'm a professional mess maker. It's just that I know how to clean up after myself. Any other questions?
How do you know when it goes bad, or what's the safety precautions here?
Okay.
Will your nose always tell you?
Yes. It's going to smell off the moment you open it. That's the best way to tell. Especially with the way the milk is, like it doesn't mold, so you're not really looking for anything funny. Since you're already technically putting it past where it starts turning, because that's what the bacteria does to it, you're looking for more of a like really sour taste or anything that tastes off. Like if you get perfect example. If you open one of these and you taste it and you taste something that tastes like peanuts, I haven't used peanuts in any of this, throw it out. Like it's going to pick up odd flavors. Like if you leave it uncovered, if you actually get online and look, it says for the mesophilic ones to cover them with like cheesecloth or coffee filters or something like that. It's actually anaerobic, so I just put the lid on it and put it away. And that's all you really need to do. But if you left it open and left it near cut onions, it's going to taste like onions. If you have fish in your refrigerator that is open and smelly, it will taste like fish if it is open.
So it's not gonna expand, so you can put the lid on it and tighten it.
Yes. I actually think that's part of the problem with this one. I may have filled it up too much, which caused it to kind of pop open and get different air in there. So, yeah, You can, just make sure you don't fill it above the normal fill line. The Mesophilics I did just purely because it's a quart. I put a quart of milk in it, and I put my 2 tablespoons, and then it was right above the line that it was supposed to be on, and I was like, well, I hope it's gonna work. Because typically when I do it at home, I literally do 2 quarts, and that's it. But a tablespoon is all you need, and technically these are still allowed. Y'all can take a tablespoon of this, take it home, put it in milk, leave it out on your counter as long as it's, you know, in that range, the 70 to 78, and you'll have yogurt by tomorrow. That's what makes it really, really fun, because technically you're not wasting anything. It's just a tablespoon.
Now, what is the difference between eating yogurt or drinking buttermilk and drinking milk that has gone sour?
The bacteria, the specific bacteria. It's the same difference between sourdough bread and when bread starts to turn. Because if you ever made a dough and left it out, and sometimes it would get that super sour smell, that is the sourdough taking the far end of the spectrum that you really don't want. But it's just bacteria. That's the only difference. Same thing with sour cream. And I know for cultures for health and what is this one, positively probiotics, they sell all the bacteria to make every single one of those, including the sourdough, including anything that you have that's a culture. That's what these companies specialize in. So if you want to do buttermilk, they have buttermilk cultures. Technically, you just keep using buttermilk to make buttermilk. Probably the exact same process, 1 tablespoon to 1 quart. Let it sit. The counterintuitive thing is you have to let it sit out. It actually needs to be at 70 to 78 degrees for it to ferment and culture and turn into what it's supposed to. But that is the ultimate game of this, and it's, in my opinion, it's really fun because it's like you get to play scientist once a week. You know, you get to put all this together, and hopefully something comes out. I have had quite a few fail on me, and I have had quite a few amazing successes. And it all comes down to, like, my house was a little bit warmer one day than it was the other because the outside temperature was hotter. So the bacteria really, really got it, you know, really got excited and went through everything, and it got really sour from doing that. But my guess is that when it was 78 in the house. But I also have a really old house that's not really airtight, so could be anything. It truly is being a scientist. Any other questions?
Okay, I'm still confused here. In these quart jars,
Mhm.
you've just got different kinds of starters.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep, same milk.
And yeah, okay. And you mixed to make the cupful.
Mhm.
You've got those cupfuls there. And you said all we needed was a little bit of the starter.
The starter comes in like a half-gram pouch.
Okay.
So you get the 1 pouch, it goes to 1 cup.
Okay.
So you take this, you get your milk to room temperature, or you can put it in there cold, it just takes longer.
Right. Okay.
But when the milk hits room temperature, you put this in, you stir it in to break up the starter, because it actually, I'll pass around the packet. If you push this one open and look, it still has little bits of it in there. And all it is just like freeze-dried milk. They took the same yogurt, they freeze-dried it, and that's the starter. The moment you get it wet again, the moment you agitate it, it starts living, and it starts, you know, breaking down the milk and doing what it does and turning it into whatever the final culture product is. But the only difference between these 3 is the different bacteria, the different cultures. And that would be the same if we made milk kefir, which is a kind of a new trendy drink, but it's a fermented like yogurt drink. And that in itself is just a different bacteria. It's a different culture you start with. Have I cleared it up any, or has I mucked it up?
Confusion leads to
I
knowledge.
just got confused because you had all these quart jars and then you had the little starters in the cups, and
So
the
it's
whole process just kind of confused me there.
So these were the prerequisites to the jars. When you start with a pouch,
Okay,
you need 1 cup of milk. That is all it's going to make.
that's all you
Yep.
need with that pouch.
So if you're doing mesophilic, which is the one you do at room temperature,
Okay,
you let your milk come to temperature.
gotcha.
You take the packet, you open it up, you put it in there, stir it, or you can do, you know, the 1 tablespoon out of the normal, like, live active, 1 tablespoon of this into the cup, stir it up, let it sit out at room temperature for, I think you're gonna start seeing stuff in about 5 hours is when it would start, like you would start seeing it curdle a little bit and actually see the milk do some different than it normally would. And then at that point, after 8 hours, you put it in the refrigerator for at least 6, pull it back out, bring it back up to temp, and then you take 1 tablespoon of this, and then you make the full quart. And then technically, you can just continue to go bigger.
Okay, so the quart is what is ready to eat.
Yes. The quart is ready. Well, technically, these are too, but these are not as fermented. They are more, you know, when you're making bread and you put the yeast in the water to let the yeast kind of
Right.
get active, that's basically what this is. I put it in the styrofoam cups because I only had a certain number of jars, but that is verbatim what this is. It is just live active yeast.
So after you've got a cup of that, and you use a couple of tablespoons to make a couple of quarts, then you throw that away.
You can use more than a tablespoon to make the quart. The tablespoon is the minimum. So technically, I could take this whole cup, drop it in some milk, give it a good stir, close it up, leave it sitting out, and it will still make yogurt. May not be as thick, may not be thin, because the more starter you put in it, the more bacteria it has in it, so it's not actually trying to reproduce, it's more breaking down the milk. Any other questions? I know it sounds really, really complicated, it's a whole lot of information, but actual making it is, you take a tablespoon of this or the yogurt, you put it in room temperature milk, and you set it aside in your kitchen. Don't shake it, don't stir it. After you put it in, you give that first stir, because different bacteria break down in different ways. I know the Villi, I purposely got the, well, I think it's this one. I purposely got the short Villi instead of the long one. Villi makes a ropey yogurt. Typically you find it in like the Middle East, that sort of culture. Any other questions? Well, truthfully, if y'all have any questions about this, y'all know where I am. Feel free to call, especially if y'all try to do it at home, because I know this is something that's not. When I first learned how to do this, the putting the milk in the corner and leaving it alone drove me insane. Because it's like it's going to spoil. It's not going to turn into yogurt, it's going to spoil. Sure enough, I had the best yogurt I've ever had in the next day. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it is a very old process. And I know the thermophilic is really, really complicated because you have to heat it up and cool it off and then leave it at a certain temperature. But either one of them turn out with amazing products. Yes?
Why doesn't it spoil?
Because of the bacteria. It's basically the bacteria cultures that we are building, the good bacteria. I know, probiotics are a big push right now. The good live bacteria kills off the other bacteria by not allowing it to have room to grow. It's the same thing with gardens and weeds. If you plant a pretty garden, the weeds start coming up, they start taking the sunlight and the nutrients and all that from the other, so they'll actually kill off the plants that you want. Whereas in this case, is the reverse. We're basically planting weeds in the garden, and we want this to take over everything, because it is going to keep it from being spoiled. Now, of course, if you leave it out on the counter for 3 days, it's going to be very sour, but it's not really going to be spoiled, because they create lactic acid. Same stuff you find in pickles. And that's what it does to keep it. The lactic acid breaks down and recomposes the proteins in the milk to cause it to not be susceptible to it. It's like a cooking process. Ceviche is what I'm thinking of, where you put the shrimp in the vinegar and you let it sit for a couple hours. It actually cooks it. It breaks down the proteins and makes them tough, which prevent other bacteria from getting in it.
But it will mold in time, won't it?
Of course, like everything else, it is a live product. If you leave it out and bacteria dies, other bacteria will step in and take its place, and those may be mold, they may be any number of things. It all depends on the process.
Then so,
Ben, you mentioned 3 kinds of cultures that you bought
Mhm.
for this. Did you notice any difference in using the 3
Um,
or any results?
So when I was doing the starters, the Belgian turned out beautiful. Like I was actually really happy about that. I thought it was going to be the best yogurt today until I walked in and found that. But it truly is it truly is a gamble. You know, you're relying on a live culture to do what you needed to, maybe within the time frame you needed to. It may take 2 more days. It is just all about watching it and seeing where it's coming through. The 3 different types that I got, the reason why I got those is I was looking for a mild, which is the Villi, and a sweet, which would be the Belgian. Because the bacteria itself actually produces some of the like lactate, the milk sugar, lactose. It actually breaks down the milk, breaks the sugar apart, so that when you eat it, it's a little bit sweeter than it normally would be anyway. Whereas the Skyr produces more lactic acid and is more on the sour side of the spectrum, which is the reason why typically when you buy Skyr in the store, you never find a plain one. You always find one with fruit, because plain Skyr is pretty rough. Like, it makes a wonderful mayonnaise change in, like, you know, chicken salad or something like that, because it tastes like you added a little bit of vinegar to it. It makes it really pop, especially with the pickles.
And then my other question may be irrelevant, but is kefir this kind of a product?
Yes, it is a little bit different of a fermentation cycle. I'm not really, I was studying all of this, so that one kind of went out there so I could remember all this. But yeah, kefir is about the exact same process. I know that there's like water kefir, milk kefir, even what's the other one? The one that uses, they call it Scooby.
I mean, clay kefir is really, really sour, unflavored.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of that is the lactic acid that's produced by the bacteria. That's the only reason. But,
Which is the same principle as putting vinegar in milk to make buttermilk.
yep, the exact same principle. Just a little bit more complicated, making it like they did the other way. I know I was talking to somebody on Saturday when I was going through and doing all this, and they kept making the point of her husband makes yogurt at home, but he uses a machine. Well, that's a very easy way to do it, but since I'm doing the class, I wanted to do it the harder way, to show the harder way of doing it, because this is basically putting the towel around it and putting it in the oven. They have many different pieces of equipment to do it. I know when I was looking at the different stuff for this class, they actually have a kefir pitcher that you ferment in. Now, that was a brand new thing that was it Positively Probiotics was really, really advertising. But I think that's one of their new items that's new to them. Any other questions before y'all come up and try some yogurt?
You always make your own buttermilk? Most-
Not always. It all depends on the situation. If I have it at hand, I'll go ahead and use the other. Because for buttermilk specifically, I haven't really noticed that much of a difference. Now I imagine if I went through the whole process like I did these and, you know, got the original starter and going through, I'll be able to taste the difference. But I don't know if it's going to be worthwhile to go through all that effort when the difference is minute. But yet again, the higher quality that you're trying to shoot for, the more control you have over the main ingredients, the better it's actually going to be on the end. So, I don't always make my own buttermilk, but I do when I need to. Any other questions?
Does it freeze buttermilk?
Buttermilk specifically? Honestly, don't know. I can look that up and get back to you.
I have some in my freezer now,
I didn't see,
and it's fine.
yeah, I don't see any problem with it. The only thing you might do is kill the bacteria in it. But yet again, if you're freezing it, you're going to pull it and thaw it and use it pretty quickly after. It's not really going to affect a whole lot.
Because I have some in my freezer.
Yeah, and I know, you know, we had that frozen yogurt truck here not that long ago. If you were to mix sugar in with this, after it reaches this point, take it out of the glass, of course, and put it in the freezer. If you go in and stir it, I think what was I reading? It was like once every 2 hours for the first 4 hours it was in there. It would actually make its own frozen yogurt. You just have to add sugar to it, so it's not like a sour frozen yogurt or, you know, tastes like cheese. Because I'm not really sure frozen cheese is going to be a good selling point for about anything.
And at that point, you would flavor it according to the
Yes.
kind you want.
Yes. And that is the entire reason why I like doing this. It is completely, it's very easy to do with the mesophilic. It's very easy to make sure everything's done. And when you get to the final point, you can literally control everything from the milk you put into it, all the way to the flavorings on the very end. And that's how we go through. Now, we have toppings set up. I have the two favorite toppings in my house. My girlfriend likes the chocolate syrup on it, and I just do honey. We had that class where we did the granola not that long ago. This is what I eat for breakfast. Every morning. But come on up. Have a taste. It is actually more of a stronger yogurt. It's an Icelandic